You believe you think for yourself, but what if most of your thoughts are not yours at all? What if intelligence is not about being clever, educated, or informed, but about seeing what others are trained to ignore and resisting what silently controls them? In a world obsessed with noise, speed, and reaction, true intelligence has become rare, almost dangerous. This video explores 10 distinct levels of intelligence that separate thinkers from pawns, not in an academic sense, but in a deeply psychological and existential one, inspired by the cold clarity of Machiavellian insight. You will recognize yourself in some levels, and you may feel uncomfortable in others. That discomfort is not an accident. It is a signal. If you are ready to face it, stay until the end. Comment the phrase, "I choose to see," to mark your awareness. Subscribe, like this video, and prepare to confront a truth most people unconsciously spend their lives avoiding. Long before intelligence was reduced to tests, titles, or credentials, it was understood as the capacity to see reality without illusion. Ancient strategists, Stoic philosophers, and Renaissance thinkers all agreed on one disturbing idea. Most human beings do not think, they react. Figures like Machiavelli did not invent manipulation. They simply observed power as it truly operates beneath morality, beneath appearances, beneath comforting stories. Over time, this kind of intelligence became threatening. Societies built on obedience, consumption, and emotional reflex could not afford citizens who saw patterns, motives, and hidden incentives. So intelligence was rebranded as conformity with intelligence, information with wisdom, noise with depth. Today, the wounds of our era, anxiety, identity, confusion, collective outrage are symptoms of this loss. When awareness disappears, people become predictable. And predictability is the dream of power. The first level of intelligence is obedience, disguised as normality. At this stage, you confuse adaptation with understanding. You repeat opinions you did not examine, defend systems you did not design, and desire lives you did not choose. You believe you are thinking because your mind is busy, but busyness is not depth. This level is not stupid. It is conditioned. The tragedy is that it feels safe. You are rewarded for compliance, praised for fitting in, and reassured by consensus. Machiavellian clarity begins with a brutal observation. The majority mistake repetition for truth. If you are here, your reactions are predictable, your outrage is programmable, and your fears are profitable. The system does not need to control you by force, because you volunteer your obedience through habits, routines, and inherited beliefs. Most people never leave this level, because leaving it requires losing social comfort, and comfort is addictive. The second level of intelligence is emotional reactivity, mistaken for authenticity. Here, you believe your emotions are your truth. You react instantly, passionately, and publicly. You feel alive because you feel intensely. But intensity is not awareness. At this level, you are driven by triggers, praise, humiliation, comparison, rejection. Machiavelli would recognize this instantly as weakness, not because emotions are wrong, but because unexamined emotions are levers. Anyone who can provoke you can control you. Modern culture glorifies this level because reactive people are easy to mobilize and easy to divide. You believe you are expressing yourself, yet you are being played by invisible scripts written by others. True intelligence begins when you realize that not every emotion deserves obedience. The moment you pause before reacting, you step out of this level. The third level of intelligence is information accumulation without integration. You read, you watch, you listen, you know facts. You feel superior to the first two levels because you are informed. But information alone does not equal understanding. At this stage, your mind becomes a storage unit, not a strategist. You collect ideas without hierarchy, context, or synthesis. You quote thinkers without embodying their insights. Machiavellian intelligence sees knowledge as a weapon only when it is structured and applied. Raw information without discernment creates confusion, not clarity. This level often traps intelligent people because it feeds the ego while avoiding transformation. You know what is wrong with the world, yet your own patterns remain unchanged. Knowledge becomes entertainment instead of power. The fourth level of intelligence is pattern recognition. This is where thinking truly begins. You start noticing repetitions beneath chaos. You see how the same narratives return, how the same personalities rise and fall, how the same mistakes repeat across generations. You understand that history is not random, and human behavior is remarkably consistent. At this level, you stop judging people morally and start observing them psychologically. This is dangerous territory because it dissolves comforting illusions. You begin to see incentives behind actions, not just words. Machiavelli lived here. He understood that people rarely act from virtue alone. They act from fear, desire, and advantage. This level separates thinkers from believers. Once you see patterns, you cannot unsee them. The fifth level of intelligence is self-observation without self-deception. This is where most people retreat. You turn the same analytical gaze inward. You notice your contradictions, your hidden motives, your need for approval, your fear of loss. You stop pretending you are purely rational or morally superior. This level is painful because it destroys the image you have of yourself. But it is also liberating. Machiavellian wisdom does not ask you to be pure. It asks you to be honest. Until you understand your own weaknesses, you will project them onto others and remain manipulable. Self-knowledge is not self-hatred. It is strategic clarity. If you cannot see your own strings, you cannot cut them. The sixth level of intelligence is emotional discipline. Not suppression, not denial, but mastery. You feel emotions fully without letting them dictate your behavior. You learn to sit with discomfort without fleeing into distraction or reaction. This level creates an inner gap between stimulus and response. In that gap lives power. While others explode, you observe. While others beg for validation, you remain silent. This silence is not emptiness. It is control. Machiavellian intelligence values restraint because restraint creates unpredictability. When people cannot read you easily, they cannot use you easily. At this level, you become calm in situations that destabilize others, and that calm itself becomes influence. The seventh level of intelligence is understanding power dynamics. You see every interaction as an exchange of leverage, status, and perception. This does not make you cynical, it makes you lucid. You understand that power is rarely announced, it is implied. It exists in who speaks last, who needs whom more, who can walk away. At this level, you stop taking things personally. Praise, insults, attention, neglect, all become signals, not identities. Machiavelli taught that those who misunderstand power become victims of it while believing they are virtuous. This level allows you to navigate systems without being consumed by them. You do not seek domination, you seek positioning. The eighth level of intelligence is long-term thinking. Here, you sacrifice short-term comfort for long-term advantage. You understand delayed gratification not as discipline, but as vision. While others chase immediate pleasure, you build invisible foundations. This level feels lonely because its rewards are not immediate or visible. You are willing to look foolish now, to be unshakable later. Machiavellian strategy is temporal. Those who think only in the present are easy to distract. Those who think in decades shape outcomes silently. This level rewires your relationship with time. You stop asking, "What do I want now?" and start asking, "Who am I becoming?" The ninth level of intelligence is strategic silence. You realize that most words weaken your position. You speak less, listen more, and reveal selectively. You no longer feel the need to explain yourself to be real. Silence becomes a tool, not a void. In a culture addicted to constant expression, restraint becomes intimidating. People project onto you because you do not fill the space with noise. Machiavelli understood that mystery amplifies authority. When you stop oversharing your intentions, you regain control over how you are perceived. This level is not about manipulation. It is about conservation of energy and meaning. The 10th level of intelligence begins where part 2 will take you, but its shadow is already visible here. It is the ability to operate beyond ego, beyond fear, beyond validation. It is not about winning games, but about choosing which games are worth playing. Most people never reach this level because it requires letting go of identity itself. The thinker becomes dangerous not because he dominates others, but because he is no longer controllable. This level does not shout. It does not seek recognition. It watches, waits, and moves only when necessary. And that is where the true separation begins. Beyond the surface levels of intelligence lies a territory few are willing to enter, because it demands the death of comforting illusions rather than the accumulation of new ideas. At this stage, intelligence stops being something you possess and becomes something you embody. The 10th level hinted at earlier is not a badge of superiority, but a quiet form of sovereignty. It begins with the collapse of the ego as the center of decision-making. Most people believe they act freely, yet their choices orbit around a fragile core made of approval, fear, resentment, and unresolved wounds. Advanced intelligence recognizes this ego not as an enemy, but as a mechanism. You observe it like a tool, not an identity. When praise no longer inflates you and criticism no longer wounds you, your behavior becomes unhooked from external control. This is why truly intelligent individuals often appear calm to the point of being unsettling. They are no longer negotiating their worth with the world. At this depth, you begin to see one of the greatest illusions of modern life: the belief that freedom means expression. In reality, constant expression is often a compulsion, not a choice. People speak to reassure themselves they exist. They display to feel valuable. They argue to protect an identity they have not examined. Machiavellian lucidity exposes this as vulnerability. The more you need to express, the more you reveal your levers. Advanced intelligence moves in the opposite direction. It chooses opacity over transparency, intention over impulse. This does not mean becoming cold or inhuman. It means understanding that not everything true needs to be visible, and not everything visible is true. You stop confusing authenticity with exposure. Another paradox emerges here. The less you need control, the more influence you gain. Most people try to dominate outcomes directly. They push, convince, pressure, and perform. But direct control creates resistance. At higher levels of intelligence, you understand indirect power. You shape environments rather than people. You influence incentives rather than emotions. You allow others to believe they are choosing freely, while the structure quietly guides them. This is not manipulation for its own sake. It is an understanding of human nature. People resist force, but they follow paths that feel self-chosen. The intelligent individual does not fight human psychology. He aligns with it. At this level, you also confront the illusion of moral comfort. Many people hide their desire for power behind moral language. They condemn what they secretly envy and shame what they fear becoming. Advanced intelligence strips morality of its performative layer and looks at outcomes instead. This does not mean abandoning ethics, It means refusing to confuse virtue with naivety. History is full of well-intentioned people who caused harm because they refused to see reality as it was. Machiavellian insight insists on clarity first, judgment second. You stop asking, is this good or bad? And start asking, what does this produce and who does it serve? One of the most unsettling realizations at this depth is that most conflicts are not about truth, but about identity preservation. People do not argue to discover reality. They argue to defend who they believe they are. Once you see this, debates lose their emotional charge. You no longer feel compelled to convince everyone. You understand that timing matters more than force, and silence often speaks louder than explanation. Advanced intelligence knows when to withdraw, not out of fear, but out of strategic patience. You conserve energy for moments that matter. You stop trying to wake those who are invested in sleeping. This level also reveals a hidden cost of intelligence: loneliness. Not the dramatic loneliness of rejection, but the quiet distance that comes from seeing clearly. When you perceive patterns, motives, and cycles, many interactions lose their mystery. You enjoy people, but you are rarely surprised by them. This can feel isolating if you mistake understanding for superiority. True mastery avoids this trap. You remain compassionate without becoming entangled. You understand without excusing. You participate without dissolving yourself. This balance is rare, and it is where many intelligent people fall back into cynicism. But cynicism is simply disappointment that never matured into wisdom. At the deepest level, intelligence becomes alignment with reality rather than resistance to it. You stop demanding that life be fair, people be consistent, or outcomes be guaranteed. You work with probability, not hope. You accept uncertainty as a condition, not a flaw. This acceptance does not weaken you, it sharpens you. When you no longer need certainty, you move fluidly. When you no longer need validation, you become self-referential. Your standards come from within, not from applause. This is why such individuals are hard to manipulate. There is nothing obvious to take away from them. Advanced intelligence also changes your relationship with desire. You see how desire can enslave when unconscious and empower when disciplined. Most people chase what excites them and avoid what challenges them. You reverse this. You choose what strengthens you, even when it is uncomfortable. You delay pleasure not as punishment, but as refinement. Desire becomes directional rather than impulsive. This is one of the least discussed aspects of intelligence, yet one of the most decisive. Whoever controls your desires controls your future. When you take that control back, your life stops being reactive. Finally, this level forces a confrontation with meaning, not meaning handed down by culture, ideology, or tradition, but meaning constructed consciously. You understand that life does not give purpose, it responds to it. You choose your values knowing they are chosen, not inherited. This makes you responsible, and responsibility is frightening. Many prefer to remain pawns, because pawns are not accountable for the board. But thinkers accept the burden of choice. They know that clarity comes with weight. And yet, they would not trade it for comfort, because once you have seen how the game works, pretending otherwise becomes unbearable. This is where the separation truly becomes irreversible, not because you are smarter, but because you are no longer asleep. Understanding these levels means nothing if they remain intellectual entertainment. So the real work begins when you translate awareness into daily behavior. The first practice is radical slowing down. You deliberately create distance between stimulus and response. When something triggers you, you do not react immediately, you wait. You observe the physical sensation, the mental narrative, the urge to act. This pause is not passive. It is an act of power. Every time you interrupt automatic reaction, you weaken the conditioning that keeps you predictable. Start with small moments. A message you do not answer right away. An insult you do not defend against. An impulse you delay. Over time, this space becomes natural. You stop being dragged by the current and start choosing your movements. This single habit alone moves you beyond the first levels of intelligence. The second practice is disciplined self-observation. Each day, you examine your own behavior without moral judgment. You ask yourself uncomfortable questions. Where did I seek approval today? Where did I avoid discomfort? Where did I lie to protect my self-image? You do not punish yourself for these answers. You collect data. Think of yourself as both the strategist and the territory. This practice exposes hidden motives that silently drive your decisions. When you see them clearly, they lose their grip. Most people avoid this because it destabilizes the identity they have built. But intelligence grows precisely where identity loosens. The goal is not to become perfect, but to become transparent to yourself. What you see clearly, you can no longer be unconsciously ruled by. The third practice is selective silence. You consciously reduce unnecessary speech. You stop explaining yourself to people who are not invested in understanding you. You stop announcing plans that are still fragile. You stop reacting verbally to every provocation. Silence recalibrates power dynamics immediately. People project, assume, and reveal themselves in the space you leave empty. This does not mean becoming withdrawn or antisocial. It means speaking with intention rather than compulsion. Before you speak, you ask yourself, does this increase my clarity, my leverage, or my alignment? Or am I speaking to soothe anxiety? Over time, your words gain weight because they are no longer abundant. The fourth practice is long-term framing. You train yourself to evaluate decisions not by immediate comfort, but by long-term consequence. When faced with a choice, you ask, what does this make easier in the future? And what does it make harder? This shifts your relationship with pleasure, effort, and sacrifice. You stop resenting discipline because you see its strategic value. You accept short-term discomfort as an investment rather than a loss. This mindset transforms how you work, relate, and build. While others chase relief, you build stability. While others seek validation, you cultivate independence. Over time, this compounds into quiet authority. The fifth practice is desire management. You identify your strongest desires and examine whether they serve you or enslave you. You deliberately practice delaying gratification, not to suppress joy, but to reclaim agency. This could mean reducing constant stimulation, controlling consumption, or limiting emotional dependencies. Desire is not the enemy. Unconscious desire is. When you choose when and how to satisfy it, desire becomes fuel instead of a chain. This practice alone dramatically increases inner strength because it removes one of the primary levers others use to influence behavior. The final practice is choosing your battles. Advanced intelligence understands that not every truth needs to be spoken, not every fight needs to be fought, and not every injustice needs your emotional investment. You learn to conserve energy. You disengage from arguments that serve only ego. You stop trying to wake people who are invested in their illusions. This is not apathy. It is precision. You place your attention where it can actually shape outcomes. Attention is your most valuable currency. Wherever you place it, your life follows. These practices will feel uncomfortable at first because they dismantle habits built for survival, not mastery. You may feel lonely, misunderstood, or restrained. That is normal. You are exiting the realm of reflex and entering the realm of choice. Over time, something shifts. You feel less reactive, less desperate, less controlled. You begin to sense an inner stability that does not depend on circumstances. This is not dominance over others. It is sovereignty over yourself. And that is the intelligence that cannot be taken from you. What separates thinkers from pawns is not raw intelligence, education, or talent, but the degree of awareness you are willing to handle, the amount of discomfort you can endure without escaping into illusion. These 10 levels are not a ladder you climb once and forever. They are tensions you revisit throughout your life. At every stage, there is an easier option: to react instead of observe, to belong instead of see, to express instead of master, to consume instead of build. Most people choose ease, not because they are weak, but because they are never shown the cost. That cost is a life lived on autopilot, driven by forces you do not recognize, serving ends you did not choose. Machiavellian clarity is often misunderstood as cold or immoral, but at its core, it is brutally honest. It refuses comforting lies in favor of functional truth. It teaches you that power over others begins with power over yourself, and that freedom is not given by systems, ideologies, or validation, but earned through awareness and restraint. When you understand how emotions, incentives, identity, and time shape behavior, you stop being surprised by the world. You move from victimhood to authorship. You are no longer shocked by manipulation because you recognize it. You are no longer desperate for approval because you see its price. You are no longer easily provoked because you know what provocation is designed to do. The most unsettling realization is this: the world does not separate thinkers from pawns by intelligence, but by courage. The courage to look inward without flinching. The courage to stand alone without bitterness. The courage to delay gratification in a culture that worships immediacy. The courage to remain silent when noise would feel safer. This path is not glamorous, and it is rarely applauded, but it leads to something most people never experience: inner sovereignty. So the question is not which level you are on. The question is which level you are willing to leave behind. If this video resonated, it is not by accident. It means part of you already senses that something deeper is possible. Stay with that tension. Explore it. If you want to continue this journey, engage with the channel, leave your reflections in the comments, and keep walking the path of clarity. Once you see the game, you cannot unsee it. And once you stop being a pawn, the board itself begins to change.